Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition Q&A with our oil expert, Ron Cardwell, Director of Commodity Strategy for Restaurant Technologies. An exclusive look into the oil business here with Ron. Ron, you're always a busy guy, but seem busier as of late. We're going to get into all of that, but let's start with how are you?
Oh, I'm great, thanks. Yeah, you're right. A little bit busier now, but just busier with different things. It shifts. But I always love talking to you, Dave. So I'm happy to take
Yeah,
the time to do
we wouldn't be in this industry if it wasn't chaotic, right? So that's what
it.
we love about it.
Hey, we love
Um,
we love to remove the chaos in kitchens, but
yes,
apparently we find chaos in other areas, right? So
yeah, such is life, right?
that's
Um,
right.
There's been a lot of conversation, as I mentioned, within the food service industry about the differences between beef tallow and seed oils. So let's talk about this because it's maybe the biggest industry discussion in recent memory. And as the experts in cooking oil, Restaurant Technologies is here to hopefully help inform the industry on what we know. So this isn't a conversation about necessarily how one is better than the other. We're really just here to educate and inform. We're not pushing anything. We're just putting the information out there as a reliable, credible source. So let's start with the basics, Ron. What is seed oil?
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Dave. And I'd love that you point out that we're not pushing anything. We supply the oil our customers want. We just want them to make the right choice and informed decision. So let's talk about seed oil versus tallow. First of all, believe it or not, this isn't the first time this debate has ever come around. Back in the 80s, animal fats were used pretty widely in food service, and there was a big move to get animal fats out and vegetable oils in. So that discussion is, 40 years ago. And so it's just coming back around, but it's one where we need to remind everybody what it is we're looking at. First, let's talk with seed oils. It seems to be a buzzword, if you will, but seed oil is just vegetable oil. That's all it is. And the primary ones that exist, at least in the U.S. market, are soybean oil, canola oil, corn oil. Those are the big three, if you will. They make up most cooking oils and definitely most of the seed oils that are in the country. Lots of other ones like cottonseed oil or sunflower oil or little bitty niche oils, peanut oil like that. But the point is, it comes from a plant, right? And so if you grow a plant and you take the seed of that plant, you squeeze the oil out, and that's a seed oil for you. Okay. Tallow is much more simple. It's just rendered beef fat. So if you think about you take a side of beef and you heat it up and the fat drips out, that's tallow. So it goes through a different kind of process, and it's part of the meat processing industry. But they capture that fat when they trim the steaks and burgers and all that stuff, and they render it down, and that's tallow. So there's the two. Tallow's been used for centuries, for millennia, for cooking purposes, right? It's one of those that's existed for a long period of time. But seed oils have been around for a really long time too. I mean, it's not like it's a new thing. It's just new in our way of extracting greater amounts of the oil has come around. But it's not really new to human consumption, though.
Yeah, not gonna lie, everyone loves the fatty part of a steak, right? So
Oh
beef
yeah,
tallow
of
sounds
course.
delicious when
No,
when you're talking just like that.
look, you'll never have me turn it away.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of, comparing the two and, maybe one tastes better or just different than the others, it's all a matter of preference. So let's
Yep,
talk about the differences. So can you
sure.
compare the pros and cons in both,
Yeah.
especially the health benefits?
Of course, we'll kind of dive into a little bit of all of it. There's the health side of the discussion, which is definitely there. Then there's the usage, like actually practical use of the oils, especially in the food industry. You want to make sure you're using the right thing to get the results you need. And then there's a broader discussion about processed or not. So let's dive into seed oils first. So pros of a seed oil. So first of all, it's a liquid. It's a liquid oil. It's really versatile. You can use it in so many different applications. I listed off, half a dozen different seed oils, but there's at least six or seven other ones. So, and they're all a little bit different. So you can find a vegetable oil that fits exactly your need out of a wide range of availability. Add to that, there's blends that you can make of these oils to accomplish things as well too. The versatility is unmatched, which along with that means it's plentiful. You can find
Mm.
it everywhere in every state you want or every form that you need. So you can always get it, which means it seems to be the most cost-effective oil in the marketplace too. Not only for home use, but for restaurant use especially. It is just the easiest thing to get a hold of. Now, the other part that made vegetable oils come to the market in place of animal fats 40 years ago, unsaturated fats. Predominant amount of fat in vegetable oils is unsaturated fat. And we all know there's plenty of evidence on the heart healthy nature of unsaturated fats versus saturated fats. That's really what led the charge of using vegetable oils in the American, and in fact, the global food system, is the high amount of unsaturated fats for heart health. Get on top of that, you have flavor profiles. Now, for the most part, most vegetable oils will have a neutral flavor. They'll have a flavor where predominantly the food shines. So whatever you're cooking your food in you don't taste that, you taste the food. There are some vegetable oils that do impart unique flavors. They're subtle, if anything, and you can definitely change the profile of those oils to give more flavor. One of those that comes to mind is like peanut oil. It definitely has a very specific flavor. But for the most part, that soy, canola, corn, the predominant ones, they're very neutral in flavor, which makes them versatile in a lot of applications, okay? Now, let's go to tallow for real quick. Hey, what's so good about tallow? Well, it's stable. You know, in its pure form, it's a solid fat. And when you're using it in a frying operation, it holds up. It lasts a long time. You can fry for way longer because of that, right? Those saturated fats really give a stable oil for functional use. So what does that mean? It means high heat tolerance too. So not only can it last in a fryer, but the fryer can be turned up even hotter if you have to. It's not going to break down that easy. Now, I keep mentioning saturated fats, and it is high in saturated fats. No getting around that. But a good portion of those saturated fats are what called stearic acids. So stearic acids have been shown to raise your HDL, which is your good cholesterol. So a lot of the conversation right now around tallow is, hey, it's better for you, for your health. What that focuses on is really on the HDL and what that stearic acid does for your HDL. Okay, so that's a benefit of it. So it's not all horrible, but it's there, right? It is a good thing. And let's not forget flavor. Beef tallow has a unique flavor. It makes a food taste very distinct, right? Some people really love that flavor. There are restaurants who use beef tallow because it has that flavor. But it has a flavor. It is hard to get around it. It's just there. Now, switch to the con side. Kind of go back and forth a little bit. The bad things about seed oil or vegetable oil. I mentioned it's liquid. Well, that liquid could be a con. Okay, if you need a high stable oil for frying operations, sometimes you have to go to some sort of blend of oils. You have to blend different properties together. So you have to kind of move it around a little bit to get the kind of performance you might need. Some people can look at that as definitely a con, if you will. So there's wide-ranging specifications too. So picking the right one out it can be overwhelming. We talk to our customers all the time trying to find the right oil for them, right? It can be difficult to do that if you're looking just at all the veg oils. One of the other things about seed oil is it is processed. Now, that's the part that people will hang up about more often than not. You get a soybean or a canola seed, you're not really squeezing that oil out. It has to go through an extraction process. And processed food has a very big stigma right now, right? So that term can make people think veg oils or seed oils, they're just processed, and that's bad for you. We can go in and out whether that's bad for you or not, but it is processed. It has to go through a process to get extraction. So there is definitely that part that you have to deal with. Tallow. Cons for tallow. Well, we talked about that pure form being solid. That pure form being solid is a real negative when you're talking about food handling. Restaurants have to handle the oil differently. It can literally come in cubes. You have to store it differently. You have to keep it in cool environments. You can't put it in high heat environments. And you have to really physically handle the oil to put it in fryers. It's a tough thing to deal with. Yeah. You can find a way to do it. It's not insurmountable, as I said, but it's definitely a con. There's limited supply for tallow. All right. Believe it or not, most ranchers don't raise cattle just so they can get to the fat. They raise it for the meat. So that fat is a byproduct of the meat processing industry, okay? So you have to have huge consumption of meat before you'll get enough fat rendered to go into the tallow market, which means it's in limited supply. You buy one large purchase of tallow can wipe out the availability for 6 or 8 months across the country. So you have to be very strategic in it.
Yeah.
Along with that comes price volatility because of that. So
Yeah.
most of the time, you can't buy tallow for more than a couple of months out. You can't lock prices in because no one's real sure about how that availability is. So that's a definite con, is the cost side of that. And I'd be totally regretful if I didn't mention one thing about beef tallow. If you use tallow in your operation, in your frying operation, you'll no longer be able to service anyone with vegetarian diets, and you'll no longer be able to service anyone who has a kosher or halal diet. You lose all those certifications by using any kind of tallow in your restaurant. I think it's something that can be overlooked real quickly. And there's a large subset of the population that's either vegan or vegetarian, or they're following a religious restricted diet, that they want to make sure when they're eating French fries that they're not eating something that's animal based without their knowledge, right? So that can be a big negative impact for tallow as well too. There's a ton of other ones to go into, but I think those are surface levels, kind of the ones that pop in my head, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never even thought of that last point. And I know we might go down this rabbit hole here, but it almost feels like if I go out to eat at a restaurant, I'm not vegan or vegetarian or anything like that. But when I go out to a restaurant, let's say the one down the street, I don't know what they're frying in. I don't know what kind of oil they're using. Like, that's not a question I've ever thought to ask. So I can imagine if a restaurant starts using tallow, they don't advertise it, they don't put it out there.
That's right.
5 years down the line, a bunch of vegans find out that they were using beef tallow. That's not going to go over very well. Not from a PR standpoint. I don't know if it's religious. It could be even a class action standpoint, right? So there's a lot of layers to this, like most things. I want to kind of go back to what you said about the nutritional and health benefits.
Sure.
And like most things in life, I think it's multi-layered, right? I think a lot of people will look at the nutrition label. They'll look at saturated fat, they'll look at cholesterol, and they don't think about anything else beyond that. It's like bad, this is higher, this is lower, I'm going to pick this one over that one. And it sounds to me like you're saying it's definitely way more complex than that.
It is. It is. Yeah. Not all saturates are created equally, right? And not all unsaturated fats are created equally. I think we've done one of these before. We're kind of dove into the food chemistry of that, and I'll avoid that right now. But let's just say there's different kinds of saturated fats, and while saturated fats do get a lot of negative exposure, there are definitely some saturated fats that are good for you. And that this is where the stearic acid conversation falls into it with tallow. So there's a portion that's good. You don't want to throw it all and say it's all horrible. But the thing to remember is that the good comes with the bad. So you're not going to get just the good saturated fats in beef tallow. It's going to come with the palmitic fats and the stearic acids and the palmitic acids, which raise your LDL cholesterol. So they come together, right? But the same with when you're talking about the unsaturated fats. You have mono and polyunsaturated fats in vegetable oil. And some of those people have found ways that they become inflammatory. People can have sensitivities to inflammation with some of these unsaturated fats. The omega-6 is that one unsaturated fat that people have said causes inflammation. There's varying evidence on it, but everyone's different. So there definitely is a subset it could affect. But that's just not completely true, because it's really the balance of that omega-6 acid with the omega-3s. Just kind of like the tallow, it's a balance of those saturates. Omega-3s are so good for you, and they're present in vegetable oils too. So it's the balance of those two where the inflammation can occur. So you really don't want to take one tidbit of information that maybe you heard from a podcast or saw online and marry yourself to that one item. There really is a lot into it. And I know there's a certain amount of skepticism sometimes with scientists, right? Everybody thinks they've got an agenda, but there's really, really solid science behind all of these. And it's not new science. This has been around for decades. So you really can find some good sources of information. But just remember, any one item when you're talking nutrition always has a balancing effect somewhere in there. And these two oils are no exception.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't want to dwell too long on this, but you're saying that some of the saturated fats aren't all bad for you, but that doesn't mean that tallow just that doesn't mean that tallow saturated fat makes it good for you. Like
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
still saturated fat,
It's
and
still
there's a
saturated
lot of
fat.
bad with
That's
it.
exactly right.
It's just not as bad as looking at that label and
Yes,
seeing the saturated fat number and being like, oh, this is like
that's right.
this level of bad. There
That's
is
right. And
some benefit to it.
there's some benefit. There is,
Yeah.
and look, there is. We all know you can go to the internet and you can find any information you're looking for, and you can find any answer you want that information to come up with. Right? Somebody is saying something there, but there is plenty of research and good scientific research on the effects of substituting saturated fats with unsaturated fats wholesale, not isolating them. And if and there is a significant amount of evidence to show increased incidences of heart disease and stroke when you
Mm-hmm.
when you increase your saturated fat intake and decrease your unsaturated fat intake. So
Yeah.
there is good evidence there, even though you may be getting a good portion of that the healthier portion. If that is taking the place of an omega-3 fatty acid of unsaturated fat, it probably isn't going to be great, right? You got to
Mm-hmm.
balance that out and not wholesale make a full change there. Yeah.
Yeah. And one last thing before we dive in kind of into the next part. You mentioned the omega 6s being
Mm-hmm.
believed to be have an inflammatory
Mm-hmm.
nature, but I think in
Right.
one of the emails that you sent me, you said that that's only going to happen if they only
Yeah.
eat omega 6s,
That's right.
because
That's
oil
right.
will have omega 3s and all
Yes.
of these other things with it, that you're not just consuming omega 6. So it's
Very
not
true.
like if you only consume seed oil that you're going to be inflamed. That's only if you consume that certain part of the seed oil, the omega 6s. But there's a
That's
lot of other stuff in that oil that will balance that out.
That's right. That's why I'm referring to the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is if
Yeah.
that ratio gets completely out of whack, and I don't remember the ratio number that's stated out there. But yes, if you took in only omega-6 unsaturated fats and no omega-3s, yeah, there's a high likelihood you could have some sort of inflammation in
Which
your
is
body.
impossible, which is pretty much impossible.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to do it is to have such a high caloric intake of fats and oils in your foods
Yeah.
that and you're just ignoring anything else on the other
Yeah.
side. It's difficult. Now, I will say, as I said before, everyone's different. So there may
Mhm.
be, some fraction of the population that is highly sensitive to it, and maybe that ratio isn't as strong for them. But for the general public, it is highly dependent on that ratio of those two fats. And I will say this: a lot of we all take in a lot more fat and a lot more calories from fats in the processed foods we eat that we don't know. So it's
Mhm.
not just things we ate at the store or at the restaurant from the deep fryer. So there's a lot of packaged foods that have high contents of fats and oils in them. And so you can get more than you know you're taking in.
Mhm.
And personally, I think that's probably the real culprit behind the attention being paid on seed oils. It's that inclusion in packaged foods or things like
Yeah.
that increases the intake. But um, you know, I don't know if that's the real reason or not. Nobody's stated it, but that's where you get a lot of calories from fat is also those.
We kind of started out this whole thing saying there's really no definitive answer, and it really sounds like there's no definitive answer. It really is a preference thing.
It
Be
is.
informed and make a good decision, the best decision for your business based on the information that you have in front of you.
Yes.
So let's talk about food service operators who are
Mhm.
making these decisions and what they should be focused on.
Sure.
So is there one that is preferred when it comes to frying? I think we kind of touched
Yeah.
upon this already.
There's no one that is preferred. I mean,
Yeah.
preferences are on both sides of the aisle. I'll say this about tallow: the restaurants that use tallow, they prefer it because of the flavor it has. Right? It's not necessarily because of fryer performance or because it's easy handling or anything like that. It is really a flavor-driven choice.
Mhm.
And so when it comes to that, the tallow users use it because of the flavor and they get fine performance out of it. Aside from that, there are plenty of restaurants who don't want that flavor. And
Mhm.
they're using a neutral vegetable oil instead. So the short answer, Dave, is no. There's not
Mhm.
one that's preferred. I think especially when you get to blends, you get to oils like the RT Gold, which is a blend of different soybean oils. You can get that functionality that you get out of tallow. You just get it with a vegetable oil. So I
Mhm.
would never steer anybody towards one. I think it's a decision for your chef and for your kitchen manager to make, because you need to have what works for your restaurant and your operation and your customer base.
Yeah, honestly, as a consumer, I personally, and I think generally speaking, some of the more popular fries are McDonald's,
Hmm.
Shake Shack, Chick-fil-A.
That's right.
Those they all use different oils,
They
but
sure
they're
do.
all good and they're all popular and they're well known. And one place, correct me if I'm wrong, that uses tallow, I believe, is Five Guys.
Yep.
They're not necessarily ranked as the most popular or best fry
Yep.
in the industry. And no offense to Five Guys, right?
No, no.
And when I'm eating Five Guys fries, I'm not like, oh, these must have been cooked in tallow. They're so much better.
Yeah,
I feel like most people, they either just like the fry, they don't, and it doesn't necessarily they don't really necessarily know what kind of oil is being used, and so
that's right.
it
That's
really
right.
is a decision for the business.
Yeah.
So tallow is unique in that it comes in solid form.
Mhm.
So because of that, I think you also touched upon this a little bit already. Is there any infrastructure investment or changes that need to be made if someone wants to switch to tallow?
Yes, there is, and I want to follow up that original statement about being solid. There are versions of tallow that are liquid. Restaurant Technologies has been running trials at a couple of our depots on a liquid form of tallow. Now, what that is it's been processed a little bit more to separate out the solid and the liquid portions of that fat, and so we found a tallow variant that has that flavor that's liquid. But of course, it's even less available because
Yeah,
you spun it out, right? So there are
yeah.
some liquid variants. So we can supply that in limited supplies in various markets, and we're looking at expanding that. In that case, no. But in the general case, if you're going out just to a typical distributor of food products, your Cisco's or U.S. Food Service, something like that, if you order tallow, it's going to come in a cube, and
Mhm.
it's going to be a 20 or 30 pound cube of solid fat. So you're going to have to store that somewhere, and the handling of it when it goes into the fryer is much different. I think I know one of our executives told me when he was young and he worked in a fast food restaurant, he used to put those chunks of solid fat into fryers. A lot of people have memories of that from the 70s or 80s on
Yeah.
back. So yeah, you have to handle it differently. You certainly couldn't use a restaurant technology system if they're using a standard beef tallow. That solid form just won't work. The second thing is that once you turn the heat off in the fryer, it's just going to solidify. So you're
Mhm.
going to have fat, or I should say, tallow in the lines. If you dump it out in the dumpster,
Mhm. Yeah.
if you do your old fashioned carry it out to the dumpster and dump it into a used cooking oil collection, it's just going to solidify at the bottom of that tank. You're never going to get it out.
Mhm.
So those things like that are vastly different. Yeah, and it goes
Yeah.
down. You go down grease traps or down drains, which you never want to put oil down the drain, but it makes it
Yeah.
there. It's going
Yeah.
to clog plumbing because it has to be more than 120 degrees before
Yeah.
it starts getting liquids. So
I'm just
yeah.
thinking about having to clean all this
Oh,
as a business
yeah,
owner. It
definitely.
sounds
Yeah, yeah.
miserable.
It is definitely viable. You can do it. You have to have very specific handling protocols. You
Hmm.
have to have trust the people that are doing all the handling. They're going to do it.
Yeah.
Because one small, just neglect of handling will just create a vast amount of problems. I mean, there's problems handling oil everywhere. That's why we exist, right? The
Yeah.
biggest advantage we give to our customers is they don't have to handle the oil, right? And
Yeah.
and we eliminate that. Well, we exist because it is a tough thing to do. It's
Hmm.
messy and it's dangerous. And if you're going to be handling tallow and not using a restaurant technology system, it's just a whole different set of dangers that are going to
Hmm.
exist.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a big investment if someone wanted to switch. I guess
Yeah.
more cost effective if you haven't opened yet and
Yeah.
built out your
Sure.
kitchen necessarily and bought all the equipment. The investment might be a little bit easier to handle, I
Right.
guess you would say.
Yeah.
But the cost of tallow itself is also more expensive, significantly more expensive. Am I right?
Yeah, that was going to be my next point to move on. Is it's highly volatile. Again, because I said that the supply of it. When I say the supply is light, without using exact numbers, just put it this way: you're talking about the supply of tallow is less than 1% of the total supply of vegetable oils. Okay,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
of that 1%, not all of it is edible. Tallow exists in a form that goes into believe it, animal feed. It's used in a lot of industrial purposes. Um, Tallow is used to make renewable diesel. It's a
Mm.
feedstock that we use that's used just like used cooking oil. So
Mm.
tallow is one of the low carbon intensity feedstocks because it's a waste product from beef. So there are so many other uses for it that what makes it to the edible side, it only makes it there because it's way more profitable. It's going to be more expensive. So it's going to be
Mm.
more expensive, period. And if for some reason a large buyer comes in and buys something up, it'll just drive the price up 2x or 3x.
Mhm.
I mentioned before that you can't really know what the price is going to be for more than 2 or 3 months out. One of the advantages of vegetable oil is you conceivably, if you wanted to lock prices down right now, you could do it for the next 15 months. You could
Yeah.
budget your oil usage for the next year if you wanted to, know what you're dealing with. Beef tallow, you just can't. It could
Yeah.
rise 3 months from now and be twice, 3 times more expensive.
Yeah.
It's going to run a high cost.
It sounds like also because of the volatility and the price being higher because of volatility, if something were to happen, I mean, we're talking about a beef product that
Yeah,
relies on livestock, right? So if some
correct.
kind of wildfire were to occur or something were to
Sure.
completely upend the supply there, it's going to be a lot harder at that point to get tallow than like a seed oil. I mean, I think both will
Mhm.
go up in price. I think one will go
Yeah,
up in
of
price
course.
a lot faster.
I think probably the more realistic side of those dangers is that there's really only two places in the US or in the North America, I should say, that even process edible tallow.
Oh,
So a more realistic problem could be a simple manufacturing issue.
yeah.
Maybe one of them is located in Chicago. There could be a
Okay.
power outage,
Yeah.
and the national supply of this beef tallow could be drastically impacted, and
Yeah.
there's nowhere else to like substitute out there. So the volatility is there. Supply volatility is the other part. Is yes, little things could disrupt that supply line, and there's no recovering you. You can't just pick up the phone and call someone else to fill that in because there's
Mhm.
really only limited suppliers. Now, these suppliers are very good. They're great companies. They've been doing it for centuries. Really,
Mhm.
one of our suppliers in Chicago, he's been around for over 100 years.
Mhm.
They're great, but stuff still happens.
Mhm.
And so even the greatest companies have unforeseen instances. When it happens there, you're just going to have to wait. That's the problem. So that part is definitely there. So if you have a high usage store or you have several stores that are relying on that supply line being there all the time,
Mhm.
it's just a built-in risk for you. Yeah.
Sounds like a business opportunity for you and me, Ron.
Well, I mean, it's not the prettiest thing, I'll tell you
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
And we can go back and to something I left out on the pros and cons side. I told you vegetable oil is perceived as a processed food, right? I mean, and that's
Mhm.
kind of a con that's in it. But we need to be clear: beef tallow is processed. The
Mhm.
stuff that gets rendered out of the beef and taken away is a nasty product. It doesn't
Mhm.
look good. It
Yeah.
doesn't smell good. It doesn't taste great unless it's
Yeah.
dripping off your steak. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't. So it has to go through a deodorization process. It has to go through a cleanup process
Yeah.
to be edible. And in
Yeah.
fact, the markets quote something called edible tallow and they quote something called technical tallow. These are different variations of a processed, cleaned up beef tallow. So
Mhm.
at its core, it's not processed, but to get to an edible form, it certainly is. So,
Yeah. Um, I know this isn't necessarily a place to really tout RT, but I do want to ask because I'm curious. I don't even know this. What is unique about RT's tallow and the partnership with South Chicago Packing that we're
yeah.
doing? What makes it different, or what makes it unique in the sense that we can make it into liquid form and it still tastes like
Mhm.
beef tallow, or it is beef tallow.
It is beef tallow.
Yeah, it is beef tallow.
all the credit there goes to South Chicago Packing. They've developed a technique to be able to create this pourable liquid tallow, which they're the only ones doing it. So they approached us because they thought, hey, we might be able to reach some markets we otherwise couldn't, which makes sense. So what's unique about it is, like most liquids, or think of things like, let's think of raw milk, right? And fresh from the cow. It sits there, and what happens? The cream part rises to the top, right? And the milk goes to the bottom. Because in that liquid, there are solid particles and liquid particles. And given time, they kind of separate, right? So that's kind of what tallow is there's some liquid portions and some solid portions in there. Mostly it's solid, which is why it forms a solid cube. But there are kind of liquid portions suspended in there. So what South Chicago has done is they've figured out a way to separate that liquid portion out with that solid portion. It's a process called fractionation, and it's really there's fractioning off the liquid versus the solid. So they do a great job with that, and that's what we carry. It is still tallow. They haven't added anything to it, anything like that. It is not the same tallow as the solid cube. It will function well. It'll taste similar, but it's going to have a little bit different functionality, but not much, because you're losing some of that solid stability that you would have. So it's still going to be as stable, but not as stable. But more importantly, it works in RT's system. So it's liquid, so it can go through the lines. It can sit in the tank. It won't solidify. You basically have a much lower melting point on it. So it's a great product.
Gotcha.
And there's some restaurants that we've had great success with. They love it. And the interest is there on other ones for sure. That's another great idea is if, a good point. If we went to South Chicago Packing right now and asked for, additional supplies, it's probably 18 months before they can get some to us.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of those supply lines, right?
Yeah.
But they do a great job. They're a great company, incredible product, and we're really happy to have them as an option in our couple of our depots, and hopefully we can offer it, more widespread in the markets that really want it. I think it's a good reminder to definitely to our sales staff that's a good example of us being agnostic on the oils that we provide. We're not trying to talk anyone into or out of anything, but what we will talk a customer into is making sure their oil's available and that it's accessible, and they never shut their restaurant down because they don't have it, right? Yeah. And that's what our biggest concern is making sure you keep that restaurant running when you want it to run.
Yeah, best companies always put the customer first. So
for sure.
I know I'm biased by saying we're the best company, but
well, I mean,
I think we do
I'll
that.
Say it. I'll say
it. Yeah. Are there any other considerations to make when deciding between the two that we haven't really talked about yet?
I think we've covered on a high level. We've covered it. We can. It's important for everybody to remember that you don't. We said before, you don't want to latch onto one piece of information and carry that as the only thing that matters. Very nuanced discussion. Some people are really passionate about it, and I'll never shame anyone for wanting to take one or the other, because what's right for you may be not right for me.
Right.
But as long as the thing you're looking for is being accomplished, that's what's important. There is good information out there. Ask questions online that don't lead you to an answer that you want to get. If you ask some general questions, you can find some. There's a couple of really great articles on what tallow is and what seed oils are, and I'll send them to you, Dave. You can put them up in the comments. It's from the Mayo Clinic, unbiased, just health conscious, institution, world respected, the Mayo Clinic, and they have a couple of good articles on, what's seed oil, what's tallow, is it good for me, is it not, and they go through the pros and cons really well on a nutritional level. So I think it's important to do that. There's a couple of other resources out there. National Institute of Health, I trust them. I mean, some people may or may not, but the National Institute of Health, if you go on their website and search for information on tallow or seed oils, that's another great source of information. You can find lots. If you go to the tallow industry, they're going to tell you all the good things. If you go to the vegetable oil industry, they're going to tell you all the good things. So take those with a grain of salt, but it doesn't mean their information's bad. It doesn't mean they're bad. Okay. Just look at both sides if you're out there.
Just understand where the information is coming from in that case. Right?
And always feel free to contact Restaurant Technologies, and we'll guide you through it if we can. Be that unbiased, voice in your ear if you need it.
Yeah, awesome. So we will put the sources either here or here, depending on where I have room in post. And then we'll put it in the caption of the YouTube video as well if you're looking for it. And of course, you can email customer care, restaurant technology if you have questions. They'll probably direct you to either someone on our sales team that is educated on all this stuff, or Ron himself. So I think that covers everything for us today. I mean, I think I learned a lot. I always feel like I learn a lot when I talk to you, and then I have these conversations in my like personal life, like, how do you know all this about cooking oil? I'm like, well, I
You're
talked to Ron.
the next dinner party you go to, you're going to be
Oh
the only
yeah,
guy talking about fats and oils.
yeah,
Nobody's going to
yeah,
listen to you, but you'll know what you're saying.
yeah. I'm like, oh, did you cook this? You must have cooked this in canola
That's
oil.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Funny anecdote, because this topic is in the public sphere right now.
yeah.
It's probably the only time in the past 20 years where I've actually shown up at gatherings and people asked me
Oh
about fats
yeah.
and oils.
Oh
I was like,
wow. Okay, so
this
it's
is my
even like
time. I've never had
outside of
it
the industry.
before.
That's crazy, man. You must be the belle of the ball nowadays.
Well, what a broken clock twice a day is right, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right more than that. But all right, thank you so much, Ron, for your time. And if you guys, again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Restaurant Technologies. We're here just to keep you informed and make sure you have the best information possible to make the best decision possible.